Okay, so I'm here with my intervention systems project, and today I'm going to be talking about um, levels, in particular levels that pertain to educational behavioral interventions. Okay, so here we go. To start us off, I've got a video on here, but I'm not going to watch it at this moment. But when I share this, I encourage everyone to take a look. It's a TED Talk, and the woman in the TED Talk does a really good job talking about students who are disruptive. So I highly recommend that. Okay, so to start us off, to give a background, kind of the history of a level system. So it started as a behavioral contract in many ways. Came from a hospital, but by establishing levels in like a rubric for academic performance, you can essentially shape behavior by slowly increasing expectations for meeting each level. Basically, if a student performs a behavior, then they can increase a level, but it gives them that visual cue that they are meeting that goal. So that's something that I thought was really interesting. Traditionally, they were used in residential programs in hospitals, and then they were eventually put into the classroom to assess their effectiveness. Uh, Mostly because the emotional and behavioral disorders within the classroom were so detrimental at that time period, but the level system was put into place in order to kind of alleviate that. Um, they're set up in intricate ways. They're all different and they all rely on positive reinforcement, but also include some sort of reductive consequence, which basically means that, if you do the right behavior, then I'm going to give you a reward. But if you are not doing the right behavior, then I'm going to take something away. And that is, could be something as similar as or something as simple as an opportunity to do something or a privilege that not every student will get. Okay, so traditionally, though, it comes in coordination with most behavioral report cards, or DRCs, as they are in my school. I know that we hand out daily behavioral report cards to each student on a daily basis, and that really has seemingly curbed their behavior as far as the school year is concerned. Throughout my slides, I've tried to implement a few kind of lighthearted cartoons to talk about behavior within a classroom. Here, the student raises his hand and asks, "I'm behaving well. Are you sure you don't want to positively reinforce it?" Basically, paying homage to the fact that, yeah, we do like to give positive reinforcement in candy, in praise, in free time throughout the day in the classroom setting. So when students begin to realize this, they can take advantage of it. So it's our duty to make sure that we aren't positively reinforcing the act of wanting to be positively reinforced. Basically, if a student knows they are going to get a reward for a certain action, it's going to be disingenuous, and that is not going to be working very well for the student's development. So just so we know before we get started into this, and I'll have these posted at the end of the slide as well, but I took this behavioral level system from a couple different sources. Essentially, though, this Otten and Tuttle, who wrote a book for structured behavioral skills, was amazing in the fact that it gave me all the details that I needed. The larger framework for the thing that I have created for this PowerPoint comes from their book. So I highly recommend somebody taking a look at that and taking the time to research that. I kind of molded it and transformed it into something that would better suit my population of students. But just so we are all on the same page, these are the authorships. These are the people that came up with it, and I've kind of just adapted it so it could fit my population. Um, so I'll just move forward from that. So the thing is called the Link 5 Point Program. So it has two main parts. There are daily levels that are connected to a preferred activity or a reward. So say the student gets 20 minutes of free time. That free time can be playing cards, putting puzzles, sitting next to a friend, going on a walk, or playing games on a computer. That can be a reward at the end of the school day for a daily level that is met. Now, I'll get into that later, but next thing is going to be ongoing levels that students advance through based on long-term behavioral performance. Now, the thing that I found most intriguing about this program in general was the fact that it ties daily levels to long-term performance. So basically, if a student is performing daily, if they can compile that behavior through multiple days, then we can transfer that to a long-term behavioral goal. And that is something that I feel like all students need to realize when they're in class, is that this behavior needs to be a continued trend and not just, I'm going to do it 1 or 2 days out of the week, but it's consistency that we can find within this program that I think really makes it shine. And that's something that I wanted to keep from the original authors, and I thought that would work extremely well for my population of students. Next, there are 3 main functions for the system that benefit the educator itself. It acts as a basic structure for your behavioral management, so it gives you that kind of fallback. It gives you the overall program for you to use and fall back on, and that is always comforting to know that it exists. Next, it allows for a daily mode of communication between the educator and the parent regarding the behavioral performance of their student. Oftentimes, parents get lost in the mix, and I know as an intervention specialist, the parent is always, and I cannot emphasize it enough, that they are always a part of the intervention team. And so treating behavior like any other intervention, the parent needs to be involved in all steps of the process. They have a vast amount of influence on their student, so therefore they can be a tool to help reinforce some of the behaviors that we are trying to get across to the student, because they can reinforce them away from the classroom, so it gives it validity as far as what we're doing is important. And then also, the third and final function is the fact that it is a solid data collecting tool for the targeted behaviors. So we can create our IEP goals based off of the data that we can collect from these the daily behavioral report cards, in a sense. So that is 3 things that the educator can really glean from this entire fact. Here's how the system works. So setting up the point card. So you give the students this daily report card. It has 5 targeted skills. Now, how do you get the skills? I will show you that on an upcoming slide. But 3 of the skills need to pertain to just a general just a basic rule that all students need to follow within the classroom: paying attention, following directions, doing what you're told, being respectful. Something that you see in every single classroom that is going to pertain to not only the behavioral student, but also the general education students as well. The next 2 need to be the targeted skills that the student needs to address. So these skills can be selected from the IEP itself or from a direct observation of the student in classroom setting. So basically, a paraprofessional or professional needs to follow the student around and make an unbiased judgment on the student's behavior and record everything that happens within that classroom, so that the goal can be written and those individual behaviors can be pulled out and made into the point card for this part. The example I gave is keeping your hands and your feet to yourself. And this one, this cartoon made me laugh. It says Miss Mulder liked to go over a few of her rules in the first day of school, and she literally has all the rules. So I can respect Miss Mutner's struggle here. So I thought that was funny, and I'd like to share it. So here we go. So here, how the system works, we now need to reinforce the skills that we want the students to implement. So as we develop the skills, we decide which skills that need to be reinforced, we need to show them examples and non-examples of that behavior. So after being taught those appropriate skills, they are then put into practice prior to the implementation of the entire level system. So if a student needs to work on keeping their hands and feet to themselves, we need to give them an example of them being in a classroom setting where they are in fact keeping their hands and feet to themselves, and then also show them the non-example of that where they are not keeping their hands and feet to themselves. It's important to have visual examples about the target behavior that are clearly displayed, as well as, even displaying the rewards and consequences, maybe listed somewhere in the room. But self-assessment is really what we're trying to get here, so that the student understands the reasoning for the examples, non-examples, and their own behavior. So here's an example of something that I would put in my classroom that it details good behavior versus bad behavior. And it's just an example that you can put something in your classroom. Next, we need to go over the points. So basically, super straightforward. They either get the point or they don't. Did you see the student perform this task? Yes or no? And then this is something that I liked from the original plan, was these thing called turnaround points. And oftentimes when a student is struggling and they fail one time, they decide, they're like, what is the point? So then they do not try after that. But turnaround points give the student a chance to become self-aware of those behaviors, and then essentially make the right choice after they've made the wrong choice, which essentially is rectifying and showing the correct behavior. And I thought that was a great example. There are 3 levels to the system, or to the daily system, I should say. There's supervision, trust, and reward. Supervision is the highest, or restriction. Trust is the second level, and reward is obviously where the student wants to be at. So that is something within the classroom that needs to be taken into effect. Here's just another example of a classroom going crazy. So the other aspect of this is that there are data-driven long-term goals. So we take the point card. You can take the amount of points each point card has and get a daily percentage for the student. Those daily percentages can drive your behavioral goals as well as the effectiveness of your interventions. And then you can essentially move them on to the long-term levels. Our long-term levels, we start at level 2. It's a starting point for all students. It's where you get some choices, but other choices are limited. Level 1 is where they've met their goal and they have more freedoms, as much freedom as you can give them appropriately within the classroom setting. And then there's level 3, which is a complete restriction. So here's how to implement the system. We need to identify the problem behaviors, identify reinforcers and privileges, the situations and settings that the problem occurs, reinforce it into positive behavioral responses, then give the student the card and verbally praise positive behaviors, along with giving the points. So hopefully all of our classrooms can look something like this and really thrive in the future. Once again, here are my resources. I highly recommend checking them out. So my name is Clinton Schrader, and I appreciate you listening to my presentation.